Hello, hello, hello! Today's video is going to be a little different. Instead of just having Speedpaint with music on top of it, I am adding some commentary. So I don't know if there's any weird technical things, don't worry about it. Mind your own business. I've never done this before. But yeah, so for today's drawing, I decided to draw Rin and Len the Vocaloids in a 33-year-old art program. Basically, recently I found out that KidPix, a program that I used a little bit as a kid, that the old version of it, like the original 1989 version of it, is just available. There's a website where it's just accessible, that you can just use it. The version that I played around with as a kid, I think it was the KidPix Deluxe 3 or 4. I tried to look it up and they kind of just looked similar, so I tried to estimate with the years. It's possible that I used both, because it was just something that was preloaded into computer labs at the elementary schools that I went to, so it was just one of those things where if you finish your assignment early, you can go and draw on that or stuff like that, or kids would go play on Oregon Trail or that kind of thing when I was a kid. But yeah, so it's an old art program meant for children. I'd never used this version of it before, and well, I tried my best. Let's see how that went. This drawing, the total time was about 3 hours. I think officially it was 3 hours and 6 minutes that I had recorded, but there was a small portion of time where I didn't. I hit pause on the recording and I accidentally didn't unpause it when I started drawing again, so I lost about 10-15 minutes. But yeah, so you see I'm just starting off messing around with all the tools to see what's available, and I was debating if I wanted to do a background, because I knew I was going to draw the two of them, but I was like, oh, well, what should I do for the background? Should I do a pattern, a design? There's all kinds of just silly tools that it has. And at some point I settled on, okay, let me do this color. I think it would look good with the yellows in their design. And then I just started messing around with there's different screen tones, these different screen tones and textures that you can do, and you can use it with the rectangle tool, with the regular brush, and with the circle tool. So I was like, yeah, let me do this. And then I thought that I was limited to that color palette that was on the side, and so I was like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm gonna do for the skin tones. So I tried to use the screen tone options and layer them on and test out to see what I could do to mix the colors that way, because there's no blending or anything. If you color with just a solid color, it is just this. It is just solid. There's no mixing, there's no blending, I'm not if anything, this program made me feel spoiled with the modern art programs that we have today. Also, you can see on the side the colors are changing. So basically, I accidentally figured out that those little arrow keys give you access to all these other color palettes. It's still a limited color palette. You can't, there's no color picker and there's no color wheel or anything like that. So you are limited to those. And yeah, like I just said, you can't color pick, so you can't even do an eyedropper tool to try to figure out what colors you were using. You have to actually go through the palette and remember which color it was that you used. But I did notice that I don't think you can see in this recording because it just goes too fast. But basically there was a point where I was trying to flip between the palettes, but because I did it for the first time in accident, and I was trying to go back, but I kept hitting the thing and it wasn't flipping because there was a very specific spot you have to press on those little arrow keys. It's right at the top of it. I accidentally picked on the colors. Even when I figured it out, I accidentally clicked on the colors at the very bottom instead of the arrow keys. So it's not perfect, but but yeah. And you can see I abandoned that background idea because I realized, I'm gonna have to layer stuff on top because there's no layers in it, of course. So you have to just paint on top of everything, right? Kind of like traditional painting. You just have to paint on top of your sketch. And I realized if anything was off around the edges, I was gonna have to paint over it, and that was not really gonna be. I knew that wasn't gonna go well with the background I did with the screen tone circles to try to fix them if I accidentally painted on them weird. So here I was just messing around with looking at the different skin tone options. But yeah, so here's my initial sketch. I didn't want to sketch their faces because I'm gonna end up messing them up. I have to cover them up anyway. I'll do it on top. But yeah, so you see me trying to lay down some flats, and I am constantly going back to my other tab to check the reference. I don't have like multiple screens or anything. I only have one screen in my setup, so yeah, I just flip back and forth to go look at the other things. It's not like Clip Studio where I can have a little sub-view window with my reference, or I could just copy paste my reference into another layer or anything. Because there's no layers, no nothing. And that's why I do really feel spoiled with like modern art programs, because it's like so many brush options, so many like types of blending. Oh, that this is the point where I didn't unpause the recording. You can see I wrote the website, like the dimensions of the website, you have to like scroll to get the full canvas, and as you can see, like with the thing at the bottom, like the scroll bar at the bottom. But on top of that, also when I was recording this, I didn't have my whole screen being captured because I was recording it in Google Chrome because it wasn't a download. Again, it was like a website. So I didn't want to show like my bookmarks bar and stuff, so part of it is cut off, so you can't see all that I wrote, but I wrote like, guess who forgot to unpause the recording? But yeah, so you see like I'm trying to shade using the screen tone tool because I can't blend or anything, and I did consider just doing solid cell shading, but I thought it would be more fun and like look more interesting if I used the screen tone options, which honestly is making me kind of want to try to use screen tones like in my regular artwork, because like in Clip Studio it's like you have screen tone options for I think it's like in the textures section of the thing, but I also know that there's brushes out there that do screen tones, so I'm kind of curious to try it out. I've seen people who have art styles where they use screen tones for shading and stuff, but like a mixture of like painted shading and screen tones, which is, you know, obviously in my other work I paint stuff, so you can see I'm trying to do her face, and at first I was struggling a little, I made the eyes too close. I do think ultimately her face turned out cute. You will see later on, like, Len's face like turned out similar, but in my opinion not as good. But I like how her face turned out. One of my issues with this program also was that so in the recording you see the little pencil tool there, like as I'm moving around the cursor, but the cursor is only there when you're moving it. When you actually press down on it, it disappears. So you can't really see where you're drawing, except for like where the color appears. So it's like, especially when I did like that thinnest brush option, I had some trouble some of the time because I couldn't see where I was drawing it. So it was a little bit of a struggle. And also something I haven't mentioned so far is that you can only undo once in this program. So if you mess up, like Clip Studio, you can undo. Other art programs, you can just keep undoing stuff at least like a good number of times. In this, you can only undo once. So if you do an oopsie and you need to undo a few strokes, you can't. You just have to paint on over it or erase it. But the thing is, if you erase it, you erase the background color too. So, you know, you can see me doing some more shading with the screen tones in different colors because I like to shade in multiple colors. And you can see which twin I'm kind of favoring because I'm just going at it, drawing her, and then he's just over there. He's just out there. But yeah, I'm trying to work on the details as I go. Other things like worth mentioning about this program, like, so it's shown a few times in this video so far, and I'm sure there's definitely going to be more times after this, where you see me like grab a rectangle of some like that, like the sleeve. That was good timing. Like the sleeve where I take a rectangle and I like move it. So that's with that little truck icon that's on the tool thing. It's not a transform tool, but like a selection tool kind of almost, but instead of like, you have the lasso tool and stuff, right? In modern art programs, you can draw a unique like shape and stuff, or you can use rectangles, you can use shapes, right? If you want to like grab something and move it around. But in this, there's only rectangles and they are only specific sizes. So anytime I wanted to like move something, I would have to like think about how much of it I'm willing to move and how much of it I'm willing to just redraw or repaint. Like for example, sometimes when I'm drawing, I'll do the head like a weird size. Like if I feel like it'll be too big or something, so I can always just resize it. In this, I wouldn't have been able to do that unless I'm willing to cut off part of it, because the rectangles, they only go so big and they only are like specific dimensions. So I wasn't gonna be able to redo something without having to repaint something. Like I wasn't gonna be able to move something without having to draw something else. Which is like, I know that's like I feel like that's like a very digital art privilege kind of thing, because it's like you can't do that on paper. On paper, traditional art, you have to just redraw it no matter what, or just paint over it no matter what. But I am a digital artist. I would like to try more traditional art though. I do have like watercolor and stuff that I haven't used very much in acrylic paint. But anyways, but yeah, so I will say it was a bit of a challenge to use this program just because I'm not used to drawing like this. Not just because of like not doing traditional in such a long time, but also just I've drawn in programs like this before. Specifically, what comes to mind is I used to draw in an app called Speedpaint, which also didn't have layers and also had a limited palette and limited brushes. And I mean, Speedpaint didn't even at first have a blank white canvas. It was originally meant to be a graffiti app, so it only had like backgrounds that were like brick walls and trains and stuff. But I will say, I think my result did end up like resembling some of the art that I used to see on there, or just generally used to see just on the internet, like on DeviantArt and stuff. Like in a way, just because of limited color palettes and certain things. I also do feel like it had a bit of a pixel art vibe, like with the screen tones almost kind of just look like pixel art shading in a way, in my opinion, just because the texture of it. But I do ultimately like the result. I will say it's not very clean, but that's fine. Like that's not the intention. I was just trying to make something that looked decent, like looked like a finished sketch, a finished doodle. And I think I got there eventually. But it was a bit of a struggle because again, I'm used to having all my nice tools. I'm used to having all the good things that come with modern art programs, honestly. And then this did make me curious to like look up stuff about like what digital art was like back then and stuff, because I know this is just a children's art program. So I was curious, like, oh, when did digital art really start to become a thing? And like I read an article on like what digital art was back in like the 80s and 90s and stuff, because it's like I've seen the rise of digital art like in the 2000s, because for context, I was born in 1999. This art program is literally 10 years older than I am. So like I've seen the rise in digital art, right? Because like a lot of artists I used to see would be drawing with Copic markers and stuff, and then eventually they switched to like going digital. So it's like I've seen artists go from traditional tools to digital, and digital art programs have come a long way. So I was just curious what it was like before my generation, before, what were people doing back then? And it was interesting to read, like, talk about like a bit of photo manipulation and stuff like that, that kind of thing. And like post-processing with photography type stuff. But yeah, this was interesting and a bit of a challenge, because again, not the way I'm used to working. And the tools, it's just the limitations of the tools, I'm so used to eyedropping stuff, because usually when I'm drawing, I use the canvas as like a color palette, kind of like a color that I'm using, I'll scribble it on the side so that I can color drop it later to just grab it. I know there's like a better way of doing that in Clip, but I just got used to doing it that way, because I know there's like an actual paint palette tool or like a history tool, like it shows what colors you used recently, but I'm just used to the way that I do it. So having to actually flip through that arrow, like those arrow keys, in order to get to that other color palette from where I got the other colors, having to remember which one I used, that was definitely something different. Only being able to undo once. I'm used to being able to undo things a million times, and it was definitely different. But yeah. I do like where I ended up with it though. And as you can see, it's like I got there, right? Like, we're not going to talk about the anatomy. We're not going to talk about if the arms ended up at a decent length, etc., etc. We're not talking about those hands, especially. But, you know what? I got there. I will say I like Rin's face better, though, because I think it looks cuter. They look similar enough, though. Good enough. But yeah, I do like the textures of it, though. And that's another thing. It's specifically the textures, I think, that what I was saying earlier about the feel, like this looks like art that I kind of used to see, especially like on spray can. It's something about the textures and like the shading not being blended, but having like the scribbles, and I don't know. there's just a certain quality of it that reminds me of older art. That's probably where I like drew inspiration from while I was actually doing it, like without thinking about it too much. But yeah, at this point I've gotten most of it in. There's still some details and stuff that I'm missing, but we are a good ways through it. I will say I'm glad I didn't accidentally click on one of those other tools and accidentally like hit one of those, because I was actually worried I was gonna do that at some point. Like I was gonna go hit that blender thing and like try to go reach for what I think would be a brush and then accidentally do something. I don't know. I was kind of paranoid because especially with like only being able to undo once, I was worried if I did something really fucked up and like, I don't know, dropped my pen or something and like it drew across the thing, somehow something was gonna happen that I wasn't gonna be able to undo and this whole thing was just gonna be ruined. I was just paranoid. But luckily that didn't happen, so we're good. Like we're good. Here you can see I'm just trying to finish up the details, and I even like forgot some details that I wanted to include, and I end up doing that like in post after I finish the recording. But yeah, so this is pretty much where we get, and I think we're almost at the end. I didn't do any highlights like on the nose or the arms or anything. All right, I do my signature. Oh, at first I was gonna use the letter tool, but then I was like, no, I'm just gonna write it. Alright, and here we see the finished version of it. There were some little things that I did add in post, because afterwards I was looking at it and I realized there was some details missing and some little things that I wanted to fix. But yeah, ultimately I do like how the result turned out, and it was a bit of a challenge. I was losing my mind a little bit. But yeah, I do like it though. It was interesting. Maybe one day I'll try the other versions of it if they're available. It's just a chat. It's just for fun, honestly. I don't think I'll ever try to do serious artwork at GitBix, but it is actually inspiring me to try new things with the programs that I already have. So I mean that's a win. But yeah, thank you so much for watching.